Sepang testing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of drama with Sepang testing and a lot of interesting outcomes. We got to see all the aero bodywork.
Yep.
And Yamaha had a little bit of an issue.
Yeah, we had what should be a fairly boring test was very not boring. We had all kinds of drama. So let's start with the obvious stuff. So Ducati rolled out their different aero packages. They had the really aggressive front wing that we showed earlier. We can put an image of that up here, but we had the really aggressive front end aero that, kind of like we talked about last time, they basically tested it and then ruled it out as the package to go forward with. It was just, it's too much on the front end.
Oh, really? They ruled it out already?
Yeah. Throw the balance, it's too much weight on the nose, basically. So they kind of ruled that out. What they've gone with, at least at the end of testing, what they went with was what looks like a 2025 front end, or very, very close. There's like one little extra little like whoop kind of doodad in the middle of it, but otherwise it looks very much like the 25 package.
Now, the one thing I noticed on the Ducatis as well was the side fairing looked wildly different. Was that part of their 2027 aero package they were playing with?
So that part I imagine they're going to keep, actually. Is that more? So we'll show some photos here, but what you're looking at, there's sort of the main front hoops next to the number plate, if you will. So right kind of just to the outsides of the air intake and the number plate. Those are more of the traditional hoop that are going to be going forward. Then normally what you'd see is lower on the side panel of the bodywork, there's another kind of taller hoop that's more tapered in toward the body.
Right.
That has now morphed into, instead of being kind of a standalone hoop, the top attaches, but then very thinly wraps into these channels that run the length of the fairing itself, basically all the way to the rider's shin practically. And it's to channel air in a longer way, but it also gives them more of that ground effect behavior when the bike's leaned over, where the air kind of accelerates underneath the bike and then kind of almost like a diffuser on the side.
Well, from my understanding, it works like a wing, basically, right? It creates like a level of vacuum that makes the bike incredibly stable when it's on its side.
Yeah, and so that's more, looks more sophisticated, frankly. Honestly, if you put it next to a previous gen, it just looks like it's more thought out, which it is. They've got that. They had kind of a cool little feature on the very underside of the belly pan, basically.
Right, I saw that. I didn't know what to make of that.
So I think what's going on is there's a bit of a scoop on like the chin of the belly pan, basically right behind the front tire.
Right, kind of leading edge.
Yeah. And I think what it's doing is there's air that's getting channeled into the radiator, obviously, but then there's a little scoop that's getting pulled underneath that. And I think that air is getting funneled from there down and out the bottom to probably do a couple things, probably give the air that gets trapped behind that front tire somewhere to go, but also as it accelerates through, the airstream that comes out, because there's the opening for it is under the belly, kind of midway back, which is about where those little side pods exhaust to.
Oh, so they're all kind of ending up in the same rough place?
My guess is it's controlling the flow out of the side pod a little bit, almost making like a skirt to control the airflow of the side pod.
So do you think they're trying to do two things here? Not only do aero for stability, but also try to get heat away from the radiator?
I don't know. So the heat's always a problem because these engines generate tons and tons of heat.
Can't even imagine. Like 300 horsepower. That's got to be...
tons of heat.
Right.
So for sure, there's components where they have to be thoughtful about heat management because the rider's just going to get cooked if they're not careful. I don't know if this is that or if it's really to try to control the air as it comes underneath for probably some stability and maybe little bit more downforce performance while it's leaned over. We are so far behind where Formula One is in their understanding of these things. And not just the engineering side of it, not just the manufacturers, but in the journalism, right? There's guys that are so into Formula One and so into the engineering side. There's a guy named, I think it's Scarbs. I forget his full name, but he's a British guy, I think. And he does extremely detailed aero analysis on Formula One cars. He's fascinating to listen to. We don't quite have a guy like him on the MotoGP side yet who understands this stuff deeply enough to help us understand it better. So a lot of what I'm seeing is I'm interpreting what I believe is going on, but I don't have, I'm aware of aerodynamics and fluid dynamics. I've done simulation and stuff quite a bit professionally, But this is another world still. So I'm not the expert on this topic. I'm just going off of what it looks like it's doing.
You're an engineer. You work for a company that deals with the software package SolidWorks, where there's all sorts of fluid dynamics and aero things in that. So you have a better understanding than most, right?
Yeah,
because you've done these. You showed me the program, how you change the shape of the thing and the air color changes, and
this really high end stuff gets into like the Abacus tools, which is a very high level professional set of simulation tools for different modeling capabilities. It does get very complex. I think it's fascinating. I think some of this stuff is really interesting for people to see, but trying to break it down into appreciable things, because we can't see the air per se. Trying to make this kind of digestible for everybody is always a tricky thing.
Well, and I think something else that has to be considered when you're dealing with motorcycles is it's more complicated than the car. The car basically maintains its position relative to the ground at all times, where the motorcycle is wildly more dynamic. The aero, not to mention the rider, the aero and how it works when you're straight up and down versus, halfway leaned, fully lean, different body posture. So it's crazy complicated to begin with. And then also, it's who can dissect that or interpret that by looking at it, right?
Yeah. And so theirs looks, it's very interesting. It looks very polished and sophisticated at this point, which you would think it would. We're really truly getting to the kind of the last pinnacle of this generation of bikes. Things will start to change next year, but this is really as dialed as these things are going to get, frankly.
Now, speaking of aero, Aprilia had a crazy new tail section.
Yeah, the Hedgehog. Yeah.
The Hedgehog, yeah. It absolutely looked like a Hedgehog. Yeah, that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, it has multiple winged faces now, multiple surfaces it looks like they're basically trying to close up the air behind the rider is what it's meant to do. So if you look at them from like a top-down view, you can kind of see the curvature of the little wings, the little blades. And it looks like they're basically trying to take what is very turbulent air off the backside of the rider and trying to clean it up a bit as it goes through. There's probably a downforce component to it. But I think also it's really to try to clean up the air to make the bike more stable and faster. And that's important at like sonic speeds and things like that. You have to get very pointed at the end. But really at subsonic speeds, especially what cars and motorcycles are going at, the way you close the air after the vehicle means much more to the drag on the vehicle. So you'll see these very kind of teardrop looking shapes that are more blunt and rounded at the nose, and then a long teardrop to the back. That's usually your lowest drag profile. So really on these bikes, anything you can do to get the air behind the rider to close up smoothly is going to basically create less drag on the bike.
All right, so I have kind of an analogous question. We've all been on the freeway and seen the semi truck, and they have those 4 little panel things off the back of the trailer. They're effectively doing the same thing. They're closing the wind, right? By doing this taper, and it looks like the silliest little thing. Or they'll have the wings,
skirts on
the
sides.
Skirts along the side, and those are all basically.
It's all just trying to make that, and with those tractor trailers, the trailer. If you think about some of these devices, they'll make, at least in a wind tunnel anyway, these things will save like 15 or 20% drag.
Holy crap.
That can be a monumental amount of fuel savings because these things drive constantly. So you save 15% drag. It's not an exact 15% fuel increase, but it's going to be significant.
That's way more of an improvement in drag than I would have ever guessed.
Yeah, even if it's single digit increases, you think about this thing's going to travel 500,000 miles this year, and I've got a fleet of 2,000 of them.
Right.
There are huge increases in the efficiency.
And honestly, all of us who ride on the street are somewhat experts in aerodynamics because we've been behind a car that you get the buffeting in your head, and you'll get behind another vehicle that maybe is a different shape or whatever, and it'll be very smooth.
Yep.
So, kind of intuitive, we have a sense of where turbulence comes from, right?
So we'll kind of bring this back to the GP stuff a little bit. So they've got this crazy Hedgehog thing. Again, to me, it looks like they're trying to shape and steer the air coming off the backside of the rider with it mostly. I think they're I think Aprilia is now heavily reliant on those little seat wings, the ones right behind the riders, basically right behind their butt, to help keep load on the back end so they can drive the rear tire into the ground on the brakes. That's my guess. That's where they're putting more of their effort into that, and now a little bit into reducing drag. And their tail section this year, in general, looks great.
Yeah, it does look nice.
Extremely scalloped, even the exhaust pipe that comes up is integrated into the bodywork better. I think they're sort of chasing miles an hour of top speed at this point.
Do you anticipate or think that they're also playing with anti-draft technology? Like,
I wondered that too, if we're getting to a point where these guys are trying to basically make it harder to be close. I don't know that any of the teams are quite doing that yet. They're definitely not going out of their way to make it easier for someone to follow them, but I don't think they're consciously trying to make it hard to follow.
It's already hard enough.
It's already hard enough. Yeah. So I don't think they're going out of their way to do that, but it's hard to say. The other one that was interesting that probably didn't get very much attention was the KTM.
Right. No, I didn't see hardly anything on the KTM.
They're better than last year. Their times were, and we'll talk about the times here in a second, but I think the aero stuff's pretty interesting to most people. If you looked at their bikes that they went out with this year, they tried this really small upper fairing. So basically it was like, here's the windshield, and then there's just a very small upper fairing around it, and then you get into the wings below it. It actually looks similar to the Aprilia in the sense that it's this more reduced front end thing. The idea is, you mentioned the rider being out in the air. There's such a big part of the aero concept for these motorcycles. It actually helps the rider be more impactful on the aero performance.
Oh, so they have more control. So it's almost like the adjustable wings that have been banned in F1 by using the rider. Because I remember a couple of years ago, Aprilia was putting like hard plastic or harder panels in the leather suit on the upper arms, so there'd be fewer wrinkles in the leather. Like, that's going to make it, like, that's insane.
Yeah, and they went with that, and they kind of abandoned it. I don't know if the riders didn't like it or if they couldn't really find a noticeable difference. I'm not sure. But regardless, I actually thought that was a fascinating little attempt, to see what
I think we are seeing it, but I think it's so subtle.
Could be.
I mean, you and I, we're nerds. We're watching and we see the changes in the suits from year to year. Even like how the collars are shaped on the suits now, how much more of the K-Protec is along the back, how the humps have evolved on their backs for aero over the years. So I got to think there's some element of that. And it seems to show up first on the Aprilia leathers, that they'll have, like, I think it was around the knee or something. Something was shaped different around the lower
basically
leg.
Any of the like long bones, they had sort of hard panels almost on the outsides to help, because really there's no need for flexibility there. It's your femur, right? It doesn't, so they'd have almost like a semi-rigid plastic on the side, it seemed like almost like a thin slider.
Yeah.
But the KTM, what's interesting about it, and people who ride, if you ride like naked bikes on street, you'll know this, right? You get so much air hitting you when you're sitting upright with no fairing to protect you. What the riders complain about with these high downforce, high aero bikes is the bikes become really heavy to move side to side. It's a lot of physical effort to get the thing to go from one end to the other. But when they reduce the fairing on the front end, as they move over, the air hitting them, their helmet, their chest, their shoulders, actually kind of pulls the bike toward them or down. It's easier to get the weight to transition because they're getting so much more resistance on their body that they're basically able to physically move it more easily. So they're moving to this idea of, how can I keep all the wings for all the downforce, but also let the rider manipulate the bike more easily? And so I think we're seeing that now. All these upper fairings around the windshield are getting a little more tight and a little more narrow over and over. It would be a really big contrast. We should try to find a photo of the, like, let's call it like circa 2009 Yamaha, and then the current KTM front end fairings. Because the old 2009, that era of Yamaha M1 was very like almost dustbin fairing style. It was super round and bullet shaped. And these are the opposite of that. They're really minimal fairings.
Aero, a lot of people have argued, and it's hard to refute the argument, that they were getting kind of ugly. Right?
Yeah.
And it seems now with the Aero, they're almost getting prettier again. Like they're interesting to look at. They're elegant shapes.
I was torn because I've said that several times where the Aprilia is, I mean, a face only an engineer could love.
Oh, yeah. Well, like the last couple versions, they were so ugly. Like they were, especially the side profile shot. It was very disproportionate.
The weighting,
the wheel looked like the front wheel was way off the front of the bike. Like it wasn't pleasant to look at.
Yeah. But now they are getting a little more cohesive. I really do think the Ducati in black, when you see how the thing kind of scallops and forms and like this wing turns into this wing, turns into this surface, it looks more Formula One where things look more cohesive and more like put together with a theory behind them. So anyway, I'm all for it. I think it's fascinating. Let's see what else was interesting. The
Honda was fast, right? Didn't Honda set
great?
Yeah, they look really, really good.
Top speed's great. They look great in the corners. They turn. They handle. They're getting. If there's anything they're still working on, really, it does seem to be rear end grip and longevity. And they're getting miles better. I mean, the gap they made last year, they look even more prepared this year than last year. So I'm very excited to see what happens with that Honda this year. Quattro is going to be very happy in 27 with that bike.
Right. Yeah, I read an article this week where Honda was basically gushing on Luca Marini, saying that he's so intelligent and he's so articulate and he's so good at analyzing what's going on with the bike. Honda was like, we couldn't have done it without Luca Marini. He's been just a huge part of them building that package. Yeah. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say his seat's probably safe.
I bet it's fairly safe. So we made some predictions at the last one. Well, actually, let me come back to the predictions. I don't want to do this just yet. So the Honda looks good. I think that's going to be a truly competitive bike this year. In the final standings, and granted, this is testing and it's at Sepang, and I almost shouldn't bring this up. You should just throw these times out, but it is interesting.
I think it's important that people not put too much weight into the times.
But the top 7, all 5 of the Ducati riders were in the top 7. And then there was Bez on the Aprilia, and then there was Mir on the Honda. And both of those two, Bez was consistently faster, and should have been in that pack. Mir basically put in a hot lap, but his times were not, his like sprint simulations were not in that window with those other guys, not in the same level. And they all looked at Alex Marquez, who was at the top. They looked at his sprint simulation, and everyone was like just gobsmacked because he was doing what would have effectively been qualifying laps for everybody else for the whole sprint simulation.
That's insane.
But he's always good at Sepang, but he looks real good. So we may see, this may be the year that we stop talking about Alex as Mark's little brother.
Right. Like maybe he'll earn his own spot.
Yeah. So he's looking good. And then the last thing to really talk about is the Yamahas. And it was...
Right, which we alluded to that at the very beginning, that...
Just a total disaster.
Have you heard anything since? Like they stopped for a day, or did they stop for the rest of the week?
So my understanding, and this is not confirmed, but my understanding is that the engines did not fail, but the riders are trained. There are sensors all over the bike, oil pressure, all these different things. There are certain messages that they see, and if they see it, I need to come into the box. And there's other messages that when they see it, you pull over and shut the thing down because something's gone catastrophically wrong, or at least the sensor thinks it has. And we need you to not blow this thing up because it's dangerous. So they stopped at, I think Quattro had to stop on track because he got one of these messages. But it was basically, my guess is it's an oil pressure sensor, would be my guess. Because that's the type of sensor that you could have on a bike that if it goes off, if it thinks oil pressure has dropped for whatever reason, this thing's seconds away from being a grenade.
Right.
So that's my guess, is they had a sensor that freaked out about oil pressure. Who knows? It could be totally unrelated to that, but that's my guess.
And I've had a failed oil pressure sensor.
Yep.
Right. They're cheap parts. I'm guessing theirs are probably more advanced than mine was.
They had 2 bikes that did this, though.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't think it's a bad sensor. They had 2 bikes that did this.
And then they basically like shut everything down. They didn't ride that day.
So then the second day, they didn't turn a wheel. The whole second day, nobody did.
That's a shame. That's like very valuable time.
Basically, it was enough so all the teams could get information back to Japan, they could go through it, try to understand what was going on, and then they sent him out for day 3 to get more time on the bike. But it seemed like they were all on a detuned map. That my guess is, when I say detuned, probably means they just capped the rev limiter, because all their times were slow. They were all dead slow. Their top speed was dead slow. My guess is they just capped the rev limiter for safety's sake, just to try to ensure that one of these things didn't explode. But so the engine failure is a problem. Quartararo crashed on day 1 and broke a finger, and then sat out the rest of the event. But even when he was on track, he was not happy. He was slow. He was not happy. He was slower. I think on day 1, he finished something like 0.8 slower than he was last year on the inline 4, which it would be a crazy expectation for it to be significantly faster than the inline 4, just because they're still figuring this thing out. But 0.8 that's miles back. That's not even close. So That's a problem.
Right.
Rins and Miller were trying to be positive and a little more rose-tinted glasses with it. Those are both guys that are also trying to keep a seat for next year. So they're probably going to be a little more, company man and toe the line.
Well, speaking of Miller, they've been doing the stoppie contest, right? And
it's been fantastic.
It's been great.
I'm here for it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. If you watched last week, we did throw the video clip of the 2 stoppies. I'm sorry, I think Toprak has the better form in the stoppie right now. We'll see if
we'll see
if Miller can, it's that set down on the end, right? Like,
he's more practice.
Toprak just sets that rear wheel down, where Jack just goes donk.
They are characters. They did the launch for the 2026 season in Kuala Lumpur in rain, and all the riders are in their suits and on their bikes. And Miller and Toprak had this great little bit where it was not quite a race, but they were on their bikes, but they were both side saddled, holding onto the bars with both their feet on the left side of the bike on the ground. And I think they were trying to see who could go the slowest without falling. Just absolute characters. I love these two.
Oh man,
But then we do have to touch on Toprak. He, I think, like we predicted, hopefully everyone predicted or understood, he's struggling to wrap his head around MotoGP right now. He was able to get within a certain window, and now and he's said a couple of times, it's actually not the front tire that's the hard thing, it's the rear tire that's the hard problem.
No kidding.
And I don't actually know if it's really the rear tire that he's having a hard time with, or if it's just the way that you ride a GP bike that he's struggling.
Yeah, because you ride the rear tire. The rear tire is doing an enormous amount of your braking, and they're different animals.
Yeah, so I think there was this great clip that MotoGP, the website, posted, and it was Toprak going around a section of corners, right-handers, I think, and Diogo Moreira right behind him, coming from a Moto2 background. Now, they're both new to the tires. We shouldn't think that Diogo should just magically know Michelin's. He doesn't. But just the way they went through these corners looked worlds apart. Didn't even look the same. Toprak very much is kind of sitting up in the middle and taking kind of a second bow at the kind of the next part of the corner. Diogo's got this just big, giant sweeping line, and he looks fast, and he's cranked right over the whole way through. And it just looks so dead smooth. And I'm not Toprak's a talent. He's going to figure it out, but he hasn't yet. So we'll see what happens. I think it's going to take him a handful of races in the beginning of the season. And like we said before, he's absolutely just coming into this in the worst scenario. It's the Yamaha who's trying to figure out a V4. It's tires that are on their way out. It's crazy high downforce and ride height devices and all this stuff that he's learning all of it at once. And most of it's going to get thrown out.
Yeah, I really think we need to look at Toprak's performance this year, or look at what Toprak does, as he's just learning MotoGP from a very high level. Right?
Yeah.
I have no expectation of him to win. Maybe he will win anything, win a race or podium. I don't have the expectation that he will. I think next year is when Right.
And again, we shouldn't read too much into one test, but his discomfort, the fact that the bike just seems miles behind still, the idea that anybody on Yamaha is going to win a race this year without it being a weird situation that allows it to happen, it seems nearly impossible. There's just too many really good riders on the grid on good bikes.
Right. And the talent pool's deep right now.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny how it ebbs and flows. Some years the talent pool's pretty shallow and you're like, oh, we're going to be with these guys for a while. And now I think there's a lot of people who are really, they're going to have to show their chops. I think within the first 3, 4, 5 rounds, they have to really come out swinging this year. Otherwise, they're going to be replaced.
Yeah.
And I think that puts a lot of pressure on the riders. So when you see Jorge Martin, again, not showing up, not riding, like we talked last week, he's really damaged his brand, if nothing else. And now everybody's speculating, myself included, how injured is he really? How bad was that injury if he is still? It's been a year now since his first big crash at Sepang on the cold tire, and he's still not really that active.
It's unfortunate because we see this in other professional sports too. Basketball always comes to mind as the analogy to this. We see NBA players who basically have just like given up on the season, and they're like, oh, I'll just rest and recover. And you can kind of get away with that when when you are on top and everyone knows that you are the superstar. And that feels like what Martin's been doing for now going into the second season of this, where last year he was the world champion and he kept crashing and he kept making mistakes, but he seems so high on himself that I'm frankly, I sort of love all of the characters of GP for their character.
Well, wait, you have to be arrogant and sure of yourself to do this.
Yeah. But his is becoming like harder and harder to like because it just seems like, buddy, put your head down, get to work. Like you're going to get left behind if you're not careful. And it would be a shame because he's such a talent. I want to see him do well, but
I honestly feel bad for Aprilia because they spent a lot of money on him to have him basically recovering. And, you know, I don't know if we know for sure if he has signed, if he's leaving Aprilia, but
even the way Aprilia talks about it, they already are aware that he's going to Honda or Yamaha. Sorry, he's going to Yamaha. They're already talking about plan B, plan C, blah, blah, blah. So I think it's a done deal. I think it's a foregone conclusion. Who gets that seat is probably the more interesting question, really.
Right. I'm really eager to see who gets that other Aprilia. Right.
So let's talk about who's going where right now. Because I think this is a fun topic.
More has come up, right?
Well, and tons of people in the comments, and thank you all for sharing your perspectives. I love hearing it. I love it when you're like, what are you thinking? You guys are totally right. I think that's a ton of fun. So again, feel free to share your opinions on this too. Last podcast though, I actually think that Aprilia is going to put Raul on that bike, assuming he has a decent year this year. The reason for that is not, and the argument to that is like, why would you put Raul on the bike if Peco's available? And I fully admit and fully agree, Peco is the better rider than Raul.
I think Peco's going to go to VR46. I really do. I'll be
potentially
if
he sticks with Ducati.
But again, like that's Rossi's team. It's like that's his school. That's where he came up. It just makes so much sense that he would want to go back. You know, on the back of his leathers it says "Go Free," and he's talked in several interviews how the factory Ducati team is so strict that he's lost some of the joy of the sport. So you could see him being very eager to go to VR46. Yep. There's no way they would say no to him.
No,
right?
Not.
A two-time world champion.
No.
So I think I put money on it that he's going to end up at VR46.
Well, and in my opinion, he's more likely to wind up either at VR46 or at Yamaha as Martin's teammate. That is my guess. Now, I do not think the Yamaha's the better bike, obviously, but I think that's actually a little bit more likely because I think
he'd get paid more at the factory Yamaha.
He's going to get paid more,
right?
But I also think he's been there's probably an ego part where he's been so burned by Ducati that he's like, I'm out. I'm leaving entirely, and I'm going over here. That's my hunch, is he's going to wind up on the Yamaha. Why I think Raul gets the Aprilia second seat is because they had to pay more to Bez this year. They had to.
The guy is showing his chops. Yeah. He's earning whatever pay raise he gets.
Yeah, they did a fairly cringy rollout of his contract, but whatever, they have fun.
You need to go to Instagram and check it out. But he basically married his motorcycle.
Yeah.
He got Dainese to make him a leather romper that looks like a tuxedo, and the bike came out in white with a veil. It was the most Italian thing I have ever seen.
This is the wood leg all over again.
It is, yeah, 100%. It's absolutely that sense of humor, and I was delighted by it.
I like the quirkiness of it.
Yeah. And I like that he's the whole implication that he just loves that motorcycle and he loves that team, which is, man, that's what you want to see, right?
If you're Aprilia, that's what you want. You want the guy that wants to be there.
Yeah.
You don't want the guy that's like, I guess I'll ride the Aprilia.
Yeah, like Martin, who's like, he didn't even ride the motorcycle and he was looking for another ride.
He was just burned by Ducati and he's like, I'll take the next seat I can.
Yeah.
So anyway, to the Raul thing. The reason I think Raul has a chance at that second factory seat is not because he's the top rider. It's because he's going to be incredibly affordable on that second seat. He's a talented enough person. He has continuity with the team, with the bike. He knows what's going on. He's shown that he actually is talented and can win races and do well. He's going to be cheap. It's going to free up some money for some Moto2 talent, is my guess.
I think Raul's only shot is what I already kind of mentioned. If he comes out swinging and just is a banger for the first 3 or 4 or 5 rounds and shows a level of consistency, then he has a shot. But if you look at his performance last year for most of the season, he wasn't really there. He kind of figured it out at the second half of the season, had a few flashes of brilliance, but I don't think he's proven himself. And I think with the rider pool and the talent pool as deep as it is, I think Aprilia will have other options that will also be affordable that, I mean, Raul's kind of old in the scheme of things. He's not too old. I know, but compared to like some of the other kids that are coming up that might have more,
Well, and I guess that's my point is I think he is a 1-year placeholder.
Okay.
While they develop Moto2 talent. I do not think he's getting a 2-year contract. And that's actually another interesting point we should talk about.
Right, because Marquez is doing the same thing. He's pushing for like a 1-year.
Because Marquez is so smart.
Because he is so smart. He wants to see what 800 does well. This is so weird. We're talking about 2027 and 2026 hasn't even started yet. So it's hard to keep your brain straight on all these people are going places and we haven't even seen them ride yet this year.
So that's my hunch on Raul. That's why I think he has a chance. Now, he didn't do great at the Sepang test, but again, the Sepang test is just one test. If he comes out and has a good start to the season, if he's on the podium, if he's fighting at the front, if he looks good for Aprilia, I think he's got a chance at that second seat.
And if he does that, I'll completely change my tune. I just don't see that
I'm just
happening.
looking at all of the other riders in that sphere.
It is such a shuffle. It's like throwing the cards in the air.
Yeah.
As soon as Mark decides what he's going to do, all the other cards get tossed up in the air and everyone starts scrambling for what's left. Again, like Mark, like you mentioned it last week, Mark is the domino.
Yeah.
And once that domino falls, everything. But there's, again, I mean, Peco to Aprilia, that would be fantastic. And if he's tired of the Ducati and maybe he sees more money or more opportunity or more potential at a factory Aprilia than a factory Yamaha, I certainly would. It's an Italian team. I'd rather go to if I was in Peco's shoes, give me that other Aprilia slot.
You're Peco Bagnaia. You've got 2 world championships. You've won a ton of races. Your legacy is set. The difference between 2 and 3 world championships is not massive, but it's not nothing. Do you then go say, hey, I think I'm ready. Like, I could definitely go for a payday in my life. Do I go to Yamaha? Do I pull a big paycheck for 2 years or a year, whatever? Because it's going to change my life long term, right? Because Ducati, historically does not have to pay the riders tons of money.
Right, because they have the best bike, right?
Bike you want to be on.
So that's a fair argument because Peco doesn't have the big paycheck. But
So
I guess the motivation comes down to, is Peco more like Marc, where he just wants to win and ride and be successful? Or is he more like Quartararo, where he's being more pragmatic and wants the cash that he can sit like...
Yeah.
Peco might only be making $500,000 a year. Like, now, granted, I would kill for $500,000 a year, but compared to like what some of the other factory teams are getting paid, the multi-millions.
Well, and Ducati famously does high incentive contracts.
Right. Where you got to win. Like you get bonuses for winning.
Significant incentives for wins and for championship positions.
Right. And he didn't have many of those last year.
He may be on some sort of subsistence from Italy, right?
Yeah, he might be on like the Italian version of like food stamps, right?
Yeah, he didn't get any. All right. Well, anyway, let's get back to I think the other interesting thing we learned, and I had heard this on the Oxley Bomb podcast, which their ears to the ground. They always know what's going on because they're at the most of the
if you
events.
listen if you have time for another podcast after ours.
That's my favorite one.
Yeah, I really love Oxley Bomb, and I think we've reached out to Peter to see if he would be a guest.
I've never asked for him to be a guest on our podcast. I've emailed him several times, and he's been great at responding.
Oh, well, since he responds to you,
I'll reach out.
You should ask him if he'd be a guest on because I would love to have a conversation with that man.
I reached out to him because none of the podcasts ever talk about Moto2 or Moto3, and I just genuinely have questions about the lower classes, like what is going on at Kalex with the bike? How are they treating the tires? Like all the same questions I have about GP. And he was great. And he gave me what information he had, or well, at least I believe he did, but he was great to respond. So anyway, great group of guys. I would definitely recommend their podcast. But anyway, they did talk about the idea that Marquez is potentially angling for a 1-year contract, which I think prior to hearing that, I hadn't even crossed my mind that there'd be these 1-year contract ideas going out, because it does.
Yeah, so he can look see which 800 is best.
Of course he wants
He'll
that.
have his pick of the litter.
Of course he wants a 1-year contract. It makes all the sense in the world. So what he's probably going to angle for is a 1-year guaranteed and a second year, but rider option.
Option, right.
Meaning the rider gets to choose if he opts in or not, or there's some criteria, but whatever.
Again, he's Marc. Like he gets
to pick where he wants to go.
Yeah, he's probably the most talented rider in MotoGP history.
Yeah.
Especially given, 8 years between one championship and the next championship? Nobody's ever done that before.
And he gets to choose where he goes. But if he does a 1-year, every other factory has to keep at least one rider on a 1-year contract.
Right.
Because just in case.
So they can grab Marc.
Just in case we nail it and we show to have a great bike in 27, do we have a chance at pulling Marc? So you're going to see if he negotiates this, if he gets a 1-year contract, Honda, KTM for sure, probably Aprilia. I don't know about Yamaha. We'll see what they end up doing. They seem so far back, but they're all going to have at least one of the factory riders stuck on a 1-year or a 2-year with an option out type thing.
Right. Or a performance clause
where they can boot somebody if Marc becomes available and wants that bike. It's such a brilliant little, because he's sort of like, I'm messing with you in 27 and we haven't even started 26.
I know. Like I said, it's hard to keep it straight in your head, right?
Yeah.
That I got confused before we started this because I'm like, oh no, so-and-so's going here. Wait a minute. No, that's not till next, like it's, trying to think of what the lineup's going to be this year. Even when I watched like the highlights from Sepang, it was, no, that's next year. Oh wait, no, that's next year. Yeah.
So let's talk. We kind of glossed over. We didn't talk about Ducati other than the fact that they're doing really good. I think one of the things that everyone's interested in is what the heck is the GP26? What is that bike?
The Ducati GP26?
Yeah. So
is the GP24.
Well, I think it's a great little Frankenstein. So
taking the best from both?
Yeah.
Was there good parts about the 25?
Well, I think there was actually a lot of good stuff on the 25. So I am more and more convinced now. We've talked about this on an earlier one, but I'm more convinced now that the real issue with the 25 was the crankshaft.
Right.
I'm very convinced that they basically started the season with too heavy of a crankshaft, so too much crankshaft inertia, and it made braking and entering the corner very difficult for
Right, because
riders.
it would basically it didn't want to slow down. Right.
They weren't getting the same engine braking characteristic that they were used to or that they wanted. It was more difficult. So who figured it out? It's of course the most talented rider in the world. It's Marc Marquez. He figured out how to manage that rear tire. And they all talk about, we see the Marc Marquez saves on the front end where he tucks it, but somehow pulls it back in. But everybody, I've seen tons of things about him. They all talk about he's probably better with the rear brake than he is with the front brake.
That's hard to imagine.
So you think if anyone's, and he's got like this flat track background, so that makes sense. But anyway, you see that about his style and you go, well, yeah, that's the guy that's probably like, hey, actually turn off the engine braking assistance stuff. Let me just handle it. I'll figure it out. And he just manages on his own. And he's the guy who's obviously made the 25 work so well. So what I believe has happened is they've reverted back to a 24 basic engine, at least in terms of the cranked inertia, in order to give the riders the feel that they're wanting and used to. But then I think with the 26, they've basically taken pieces that they learned. So it's like 25 Aero package and the 25 plus one rear ride height device, because the new GP26, it drops the rear end further than the 25 did.
I know, it's crazy. There's some clips on MotoGP of
it looks insane.
Yeah, like the belly pan's dragging on the ground, right?
Yeah.
Like, are they going to start making out of that Kevlar carbon fiber so like it doesn't abrade away so fast?
I swear the rear swing arm literally has negative angle.
Yeah.
When the rear end's dropped all the way.
It's crazy.
It's so dropped down.
Yeah, like you think the tire's rubbing on the inner fender on the back. It's insane.
I think they have basically taken what they learned in 25 and made it better, and taken what worked in 24 and brought it forward. And that's this GP26. So what's interesting is you now have 4 of the 6 riders in Ducati that get a GP26. So it's Marc, Peco, Digia, and Alex Marquez. They all are on whatever the latest new spec is. All the other, which is only Morbidelli and Aldergay, they're on the 25, but I'm positive they're all going to have the same engine. They're all going to get that 24 plus whatever engine spec.
You'd be silly not
because Morbidelli was in that top rung. He was in that top 7 at Sepang. I'm positive he's got the good engine. Because why would you put anybody on the engine that's no good?
I'm right. Yeah. So
anyway,
and of course Ducati won't admit that. They're going to say it's a 2020. Yeah.
They'll never talk about it.
Now the other thing I think we should mention is we should all mark our calendars for June, because that's when everyone's going to test the 800s.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
we're going to be able to, I think that's going to be our first chance to see the 800s. I'm pretty excited about the 800s.
Yeah.
Not just like all the silly season stuff that we're talking about in the changes, but the simpler form, the less ride height. I'm
device.
so excited to see these 800s. So everyone like put it down on your calendar sometime in June. And I think they've done an agreement where next year's riders can ride the bike for their new team on the 800s.
Oh, that's a fantastic point.
I think so. Like, I'm not 100% certain, but I'm pretty sure.
All the contracts will be done by then.
Right. Yeah.
No one's going to be out of contract.
Yeah, and the bikes are going to be so different. And so...
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
They'll all be in solid black, no logos.
No, I hope we
brand.
get to see it. I hope that that it's all recorded and you can get it on the MotoGP website.
The interesting thing, Pirelli's come out and said, they've not talked a ton about what they're doing exactly yet, but they have come out and said that they want to basically develop a tire that does not need to have a minimum pressure limit.
Oh, that'd be great. I'd be so excited to get away from these tire pressure rules.
Which means, so Pirelli in World Superbike doesn't have a minimum pressure. Or if they do, it doesn't matter. Nobody talks about it because nobody runs near the pressure. But the point of that is we need to develop a tire that the performance window of the tire is within the safety window of the tire. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if 25, because right now basically the GP tire, MotoGP Michelin front 26.1 or whatever PSI is the minimum, and everybody runs at 26.1. That's where the tire, and they'd run lower if they were allowed to. The Pirelli, they need to basically make it say, hey, if 30, let's say 28 is the minimum. 30 is actually where it performs the best, or 32 or whatever.
Right.
That's how they have to engineer it.
26.1 is crazy low pressure for a front tire.
It is
by
insane.
the way. If you don't ride on the racetrack or do track days, 26 PSI on a front tire is nuts. Like if you pushed your bike in the garage with 26 PSI on the front tire, you'd think it was a flat tire.
And the reason it's so low, we talked about this in an earlier one, but they run a 4-inch rim on the front. Not everyone else's sport bike is a 3.5 inch inner width of the rim. So it's a 4-inch rim, so it's wider. It basically means it's more stable side to side because the sidewall is more straight up and down versus pinched. Regardless, they run this crazy low pressure, and they want to run it so low that there's a risk of it damaging the layers within the tire and
it delaminates.
And it failing, basically. Yeah,
right. Yeah, we've talked about this. Michelin's the only street tire that I've ever seen delaminate. And so I think it might be just something with Michelin's technology and how they do things.
And I don't want to bash on them because I think in the right climate and the right conditions, it probably is the best tire that there is.
Oh, yeah.
For certain
street tires, if you live in a cold, wet climate, there is not a better tire in the world than a Michelin street tire.
Yep.
So,
but we're in the high, hot desert.
Yeah, so we don't run them
it's
here.
Different
we don't
up
run
here.
them. People who get really loyal to a tire or they read online that this tire is the tire to have, maybe, but maybe not. Your climate and how you ride really are big factors in this thing. So, yeah.
On the tire thing, I actually think we're going to try to get a couple of tire guys to
that'd
join
be
the podcast.
Awesome. Yeah.
So I've got contacts at Dunlop and Pirelli.
Oh, that would be amazing.
So I don't think we're going to get them on together.
Yeah.
But hopefully we get them each to come on.
Like that tire right there has a Dunlop on it, and that right there is a Pirelli.
Yeah.
So like we're not.
I'd love to just hear it from them, basically. Like what's the thought process of these tires? You know, they're all going to obviously say they make the best tire that they can make, and they do. I believe that.
I believe they do too. And like again, it's hard to buy a bad tire anymore unless you're going to like some off-brand. But they do have different characteristics, and you know, getting a tire that works with how you ride or what you want out of a tire is half of the equation, right? It's, you know, but as so many say, like it's the most important part of your motorcycle, right? It basically, MotoGP is a great example of this. You know, we're talking about, you know, Toprak trying to figure out their rear tire. The whole MotoGP platform is built around the Michelin tires. Michelin supplied the tire. They built the motorcycle to work or to get the most out of that tire. It's not the other way around. So the importance of tires. So that'd be really cool.
Yeah, we'll see.
If your contacts would agree with that, that'd be cool.
We'll see if we can't twist their arm a little bit and get them on. But I think that's kind of what I've got for MotoGP stuff for now. I know they've got another test coming up here in a couple of weeks. We'll see what happens. The season starts soon, though. We're not that far off.
I think we're a month away from the first race. Yay!
Yeah, thankfully.
Thankfully. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
So earlier today, you actually just posted a new video on the main channel. This one was about crashing.
Right. This was a video that a lot of people had been requesting. I've actually been working and noodling how to do this video probably for over a year. I talked to a bunch of specialists. I have a lot of really close friends who are in the mental health profession. Did a bunch of research on this one. You know, I labeled it as how to, you know, recover from a crash or how to regain your confidence after a crash. But I think it's honestly broader than that. It's really how to recover or gain confidence after any failure. It's the same process, right?
You address this in the video, but it's a lot of like, oh, get back on the horse. Just get back on the bike as soon as you can kind of thing. But you really went into the mindset of it and the psychology of it, which I thought was interesting. And as I watched the video, I don't want to give away the whole video. Everyone should go watch it. But it made me think about recent crashes that I've had, right? And my crashes, through racing, right? You are just going to fall down a little more often when you go racing. So I thought about the most recent 2 crashes I've had. So it was a few years ago now, but I had one, the one further back was a crash in turn 1 of a race. So the first turn of the first lap of a race.
Which is always, we watch MotoGP, we know how chaotic turn 1 can be.
Yeah. And that's just the reality of it. And that's exactly what this one was, is basically in the middle of the first turn, 2 bikes in front of me came together. One of the guys fell down and I basically ran right into his bike that was already on the ground. And got crashed because of that.
And I'm guessing you had bikes on either side. You just had nowhere to go. Right?
Yeah,
it just happened.
It's just kind of dumb
racing
luck.
incident.
Very much so. Yeah, it's no one's real fault. It's just what happens. But with those incidents, that is truly, and it's probably one of maybe 2 incidents I've ever had where I can genuinely say I didn't really do anything wrong. I just happened to be in the wrong spot. But that's easier. That's almost easier in my mind to wrap your head around and get over the idea of it, because really all you have to do to get over that from a racer's perspective is just realize that risk, that possible outcome, you signed up for that before you grit it up, right? The fact that somebody could fall and you could get knocked down because of it, it's just a reality of racing. And so you have to just be okay with that risk before you even start. So to me, that type of an incident is actually easier to overcome and wrap your head around, because then it's a simple decision. Am I willing to take that risk again or not, is all it is. But the second one, the more recent one I had, was a crash where I was completely on my own. It was my fault. I was in a race. I had just set the lap prior. I had just set my new personal best. It was the fastest I'd ever gone. Track conditions were good. There was no issues with anything. And I'm coming into Black Rock, which is a hairpin after a long straight section, right? So if
it's the fastest section on the entire track, right?
Yeah.
Like 140, 150 miles an hour.
Yep.
If you're on a big bike.
Yeah, on a leader bike, you're coming in top of 4th gear, maybe 5th gear into the corner. So you're coming in with a lot of speed, and you're downshifting all the way down to very low in 2nd gear.
Yeah, we probably see more crashes in this corner than probably anywhere else on the track, because it is a tight turn after a fast section.
And it's easy to make a mistake there, but a lot of time is gained or lost there too. So it is a pretty crucial corner. But I was, I felt like I was gaining on the guy in front of me. I was getting closer, and I probably was just pushing a little farther, a little harder on the brake. I was tipping in a little faster, and I just basically asked too much of the front tire, and the front tucked, and I slid and crashed and a bit of a tumble. But it was totally my own fault. And to the point of your video, you can go and say whatever you want to everybody else, right? I can say, oh, it was really hot that day, or, the tire issue, pressure, blah, blah, blah. I can come up with all the reasons why it wasn't my fault. But if I can't pause and say, this is what I did, this is how I made the mistake that caused this crash, that's where getting back into it and agreeing to go do it again is really a risky thing. Is if you can't admit what went wrong or identify what went wrong, it's a pretty heady thing to try to go do it again.
Right. It's interesting when I was doing the research, one thought that and I throw this into the video is, we watch MotoGP, any racer, right? Our superheroes, they have these catastrophic crashes, right? We've seen them, like, the bike's tumbling off and bouncing up against the air fence. They get up, they sprint back to the pits, they jump on their second bike and set a lap record, right? And I'm like, how do they do that? Yep. How are they able to compartmentalize, right? Because that would shake up anybody, right? And it was the research was really interesting and compelling, right? Because, like, kind of the point you're making was, whatever you tell your wife or your coworkers or whatever, right? Your ego is really, it's trying to protect you. It's trying to protect itself, honestly, right? To save face. And it's normal and natural and it's fine. But to create that separation to, like, all right, maybe I did say this to them to save face, but I have to be honest with myself and be like, no, I did look down. I was distracted. I was whatever, because you have to have that piece. You have to have that honest assessment before you can move forward. When I was in the Army, we had to take a hill, right? And we took it, but a lot of things went wrong along the way. And, the military is really good at doing after action reports. And I had an amazing commander. And he's like, look, we have to look at this not with judgment, not with criticism, not with embarrassment, but, like, objectively look at this, because that's the only way that we're going to improve. That's the only way when we're faced with this kind of situation again, that we're going to be able to do it better.
Well, and yeah, I think the interesting part of this is all of this stuff is hard work. Convincing yourself the mental side of this is hard work. We're not wired for this, right? You're wired, well, there's a whole side of this we can get into, but you're not wired to want to go do these things and commit to these things and deal with these situations. Your brain does a lot of things to try to like shield and protect itself, right? I mean, for example, there isn't a single human in the world who's built to go more than 20 miles an hour.
Right.
Maybe 25 if you're really fast, right? But your brain, not only is your body not physically capable of running faster than that, nothing in your wiring is built to deal with speeds that fast or make decisions at that speed. So all of these things, now we've learned techniques and methods to train ourselves to deal with it better, but all of it is work. It's hard work and it's constant work. You don't just figure it out and go, oh, easy, I got it now, right? You're always thinking about it, always working. And this is just more of that. This is just more of the mental component of riding, right? It's mentally getting over things and thinking through things in a different way.
Yeah, one of the things that have always bothered me over the years is the attitude of like, oh, I'm just going to follow my instincts, right? Like, and it's, I did a video on this a couple of years ago where I did a bunch of research on it, and horses, cheetahs, humans, whatever, our comfortable lean angle is 20 degrees, right? That's as far as we're comfortable leaning, because that's how much we have to lean to balance the centripetal force of how fast we can run. All of us, it's crazy, it's this 20-degree number. And when I was making that video, I would pull up video footage of horses, video footage of cheetahs, photos of people crossed up on the motorcycle, right? They're counterleaning really. And I would level the horizon and I would put my little graphic on it, and they were all at 20 degrees.
Oh,
like the dude completely crossed up, leaned over, like the bike's like there's sparks on the photo if you go rewatch the video. And the dude is at 20 degrees. His spine and his head is at 20 degrees.
Yep.
So yeah, like we are not, evolution has not prepared us to go on a motorcycle that's capable of leaning 60 degrees.
Right.
And that's just one small piece of all the things that we have to get over. And, I love the science side of things and the objective side of things, talking to these mental health providers and reading the research on it, that we do have a fairly decent understanding of how the brain works and how to get over this. And that's what I really tried to put in the video was these processes. I'm guessing the MotoGP guys are either so comfortable with it or they have shorthand on how to get through these things, right? I'll give a spoiler on the video. One of the things is you take the thing you're saying in your head, the thing that's like your failure, right? Like the front tire is going to let go as I tip into a corner, right? And you write down where it failed, where that's true, right? And then on the other side of the page, you write all the times where it's false, right? You've been doing this for 20 years. You've been through Black Rock how many times, right? And then when you see these things lined up against each other, one failure opposed to Lord knows how many successes, and it just kind of helps your brain kind of like, oh, okay. And then it helps you better assess the mistake that you made, right? Like, okay, what did I do different this time? And again, this all kind of like pivots on that honesty.
I think Marquez in GP anyway is probably the most notable for this, where the crashing, I don't want to say that he's going and crashing on purpose, but he is 100% pushing past the limit on purpose in practices.
It's genius.
All the time.
Right.
So, and he, even at this test in Sepang, he had a crash in the middle of turn 1 at Sepang, which, and to his own admission, he says, if you're going to crash anywhere, that's the spot.
Right.
Because it's this like more than 180.
It's a big runoff.
Corner.
It's a slow turn. Yeah.
So when he fell, it's like, he's, one of my favorite, there was a Danny Eslick, who, if anybody remembers him from the AMAs, he was a bit of a character, but he always had this great quote when he'd have a crash. He goes, well, I've fallen out of bed harder than that. It's that's how I always think about with these really, like, it's a crash, yes, but mentally, physically, you're fine. It doesn't really hurt. But they're pushing into that, I have a very good chance of crashing here zone, just to understand what is the limit, where is it? But he's like, that just gets registered. It's just in there now. He goes, at that spot, at that turn, in these conditions, that's too much.
Well, and this is why racing is such the perfect test bed for all of these things. That's what we want racers to do. That's why racetracks are built the way they are, is to minimize the consequences, right? What are these guys doing that are keeping them from crashing and winning races that we can apply at a slower pace, right? Because like it or not, and this is the hardest thing about motorcycles, is the consequences are real and they can be big, right? Even a slow speed crash, and you know, most of us have experienced falling off a motorcycle at some point or another. It can be upwards of $1,000 even without an injury, right? And so to always kind of be looking and analyzing, how do we minimize that, and understanding that it you know, when it or if that it happens, right? I don't believe crashing is a requirement, but it's highly probable, you know. How do you recover and move past it? You don't want to just stop and do it, because it might be something as simple as I was just abrupt, I was just distracted, or I didn't account for how much the temperature dropped as soon as the sun went down, and now my tire has less grip. Right? Like there's all these things that we can kind of look at and analyze and make informed decisions.
You know, assuming you don't get seriously injured and you're able to continue riding, you know, in the future, it does just become another little point of experience that you get.
Yeah.
Right. And you go, I learned from that. Hopefully you learn from that. And really, frankly, if you're still here on this podcast, you're here because you want to learn, you want to get better, you want to improve, you want to learn things about how to do this sport and enjoy the sport at a kind of a higher level. And that's a commendable trait to want to improve and to want to get better. But in order to get better, you have to first acknowledge that you could be better, that you aren't as good as you could be.
Yeah. Again, honesty, right? Like, a funny little side story. When we first got the racetrack here, you remember this, you were here when it happened. And, you know, the motorcycle community was pretty strong before the racetrack, but here comes the racetrack. And, you know, now we're allowed to go as fast as we want without being chased by guys with blue flashing lights. And there was this whole shuffle of everybody kind of assessing where they fit into this pecking order. And for a lot of people, it was intensely humbling. The guy they did street rides with, who was always pretty slow and pretty conservative on the street because he understood the risk, gets on the racetrack and he was annihilating everybody. And so there was this kind of, it was really interesting to watch it happen in real time, that whole, oh, this is where my skill actually is. And again, like, it's a good thing, because that, I remember one rider in particular, like, he had this big humbling moment. He went and invested time. He went to champ school. He put a lot of effort in, and he came back like a year later, significantly quicker and safer, right? Taking less risk. So
improving is very possible. I think a lot of people get discouraged. If you have a crash, you think, oh, well, I'm just no good at this, or I can't figure this out. The reality is you probably have significantly more room to grow than you realize. You just have to put in the time and the effort and the thought, and be willing to, you know, sometimes it's taking 2 steps back in order to take a step forward. You know?
It's hard to do. It's hard to have to, like, eat that slice of humble pie. It's actually the tattoo I have on my arm is the word discipline, because to me, the best things in life come from discipline. And it's hard, right? Like, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But to my mind and my personality type, and I'm pretty sure you're the same way, is that there is incredible amounts of joy that come from proficiency. That when you achieve proficiency in a thing, it is, it's so satisfying and so joyful. And I mean, that's a big reason why we do this, right?
Go watch the video, go see the whole thing yourself, you know, make your own assumptions about, or conclusions about what you learned from it. I think a few housekeeping things.
Yeah, we have some news.
So if you are watching us on YouTube, great, because you're seeing us, which is great. We love having you here. We love
I'm sorry you have to see us, but you know,
we're doing.
I was always told I have a great face for radio, and then I choose a career in video.
But you can see us here on YouTube, which is great. If you also listen to us or prefer Spotify, you can now also watch us on Spotify. We've now started being able to upload the video itself to Spotify. So before you could just get the audio, now you can get the audio and the video on Spotify.
Yeah, Spotify just announced a new feature, so we moved our hosting over there. You should still be able to get it in all the other places. Apple Podcasts, we're still putting them there as well. But yeah, and with Spotify, it would really be helpful if you click subscribe, or I can't remember how it works on Spotify.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. But again, that helps Spotify. Like it helps us hugely, which brings us to the other new bits of news. And, we're across multiple platforms now. Look at us grow. We've been using channel memberships on YouTube forever. That's not going away. But it made more sense to have one place that if you want to support what we're doing, you can get benefits across all platforms. So we have launched a Patreon. And there's a couple tiers there. You can choose how much you want to do, but Patreon allows us to do all sorts of cool things. If you want to put your address in, you can put your address in. I have some ideas there. I'm not going to say what they are, but something just might show up. But yeah, like check it out. And what we do costs money. And if you want to help us, it means the world to us. It really does.
But yeah, check us out on Patreon. Spotify's there now. We're trying to be in a bunch of places. It now feels like these streaming services, though, it's making me long for cable. When it was all just in one little box and one little bundle, and now I've got to go all the places. But that's just how it is.
I mean, I'm on YouTube now, but like, if I look at my analytics, I can see where people watch. More and more of you are watching on television than anywhere else.
Isn't that weird?
It is. Well, it's not weird.
To me, it's weird, I guess. But yeah.
Well, I started self-assessing my behaviors, and I have to be careful. If it's in the evening and I can't sleep, don't click on YouTube, because I'll be there till 2:00 on the big TV, sitting there drinking my whiskey, and then you just get sucked down a rabbit hole. And I want to really try to make content that's worthy of being on your 83-inch high definition television. And cameras cost money, and SD cards cost money, and all these things. So yeah. But again, we're here for you. Like, this whole thing is really around you guys. I think Patreon, I'm going to try to move some of my social media posts onto Patreon. So if you want to see behind the scenes stuff when I'm doing press events, there's photos that I send to Brian or I send to my wife or whatever that I don't usually share. I'll start putting them up on Patreon so you can kind of get more behind the scenes of what it's actually like, and some of the weird stuff that happens. Some of the failures that I edit out of videos will probably make it into Patreon. So, yeah. All right. Well, I'm Dave.
I'm Brian, still.
And thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. See ya.